You're watching It's Life Live with your hosts, Juan Lee and Oliver Marcel. Come join us for enriching, enlightening, encouraging, and thought-provoking conversation. Let's go.
Hello, hello. How you doing, Oliver?
Hey, I'm good, man. How are you?
Oh, just doing wonderful, doing wonderful. It's a nice place to be on this side of the dirt. There, I tell you.
Hey, listen,
It's
it's a blessing.
it's life live.
It is a
Hey,
blessing.
welcome everybody. If you're here, welcome to It's Life Live, presented by Clear Journey. Clear Journey is a nonprofit, 501c3 nonprofit that helps individuals and families that are looking for answers to questions in life. And what we do is we provide education and resources so that you can live your best life, so that you can navigate life more successfully and that you can live a better life. So welcome, welcome, welcome. And by the way, it's Carolina Kitchen. For those that were at the webinar this past weekend, I had asked if people had ever heard of the saying, when they walk into Carolina Kitchen, they hear the staff go, welcome, welcome, welcome. And I said California Kitchen, and it was really Carolina Kitchen is what I meant to say there. So if you were there and you did hear it, as a matter of fact, there was a person who actually responded correctly, and I'm going to get back with them, because what I was going to do was give people a copy of my book if they gave me the right answer. And there was a gentleman who did it. And so and so I'm going to go back and I'm going to forward him a copy of my book for saying that it was Carolina Kitchen.
Nice.
But
I haven't experienced that yet. I've never been to Carolina Kitchen. They're actually building one. They're opening one really close to where I live now. So I will be able to experience that welcome soon.
And welcome, welcome, welcome. Hey, I don't know. It's almost like it's a Southern soul food type of place.
Okay.
It was to be honest with you, during the pandemic, man, we almost lived there. To be honest, it's comfort food, man. It's straight up comfort food. And
in the
midst of the pandemic, that was what we were after, comfort.
I hear you.
That was what we were after. So I mean, it ain't something that we need to do every day, but I tell you, it sure felt good when you just wanted to just feel something good. You just wanted something good. You know, have you heard that before? I want something good.
Yep.
I just want something good.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not here. Here I am promoting Carolina Kitchen, but the fact of the matter is that, you know, it ain't always. I'm gonna tell you, it ain't always the best thing for you, but it's good though.
Hits the spot at times.
Yeah. But I just want people to know, hey, man, we had a wonderful time this weekend at the Harmony at Home webinar, and it was just great. I've been getting good feedback from people, and granted, it was just, I think it was good on so many parts, but there were one thing that I know we had prepared for, and that the time just got away from us. And that was the fact that there was plenty of things that the panelists, you included, wanted to share. And you had dropped a nugget. And I tell you, I think you need to unpack that nugget. In light of what, in light of what we had been talking about since then, because it was too quick. It was too quick for you just to say it and just leave it there. And the benefits that this thing will share, it will spread into so many parts of your life. And it was, hey man, so I'm going to give you the floor. I'm going to share the fact. Well, here's the point. I'm going to let you share what the point was that you shared with us on Saturday.
Okay.
And then I'll let you to dig it out and just to unpack it for us because I think it's a lot there for us.
Yeah. So listen, I appreciate that, and I believe you're talking about the the bond strengthening hack that we kind of touched on briefly, and it is for those of you who are familiar with this term, you'll maybe understand where I'm going. But just some context for those who may not be familiar with who I am. My wife and I work in the relationship building space, and so we work with on one end of the spectrum, we work with couples, married couples, engaged couples, seriously dating couples. On the other end of the spectrum, small corporate teams. That's a leg that we're kind of building a little bit more. So we haven't done a whole lot in that area, but have had some significant things done in that area. But on the relationship building side, so typically when we're working with couples, we talk about strengthening their bond, because strengthening the bond for couples or for families is so important to the trajectory of your familial journey, right? And so, if the bond is strong, typically the bond will be able to undergird or withstand any stages and phases of life. So, if you think about a house, those who know me who know me know I use a lot of house and home analogies. So, if you build a house and there's no foundation, it's only sustainable for so long. The very first hurricane, the very first tornado, whatever you want to call it, it don't even have to be that severe. The very first high wind, you're probably going to find yourself in some problems. And it's the same way in your relationship. That bond should be strong. So generally, when we have couples work on building their bond, there are various areas that we want to focus on. We want to focus on the spiritual. That is not only just spiritual in the terms of God or religion or that kind of thing, but spiritual in the term in the way of getting on the same page, in the way of having common goals. In that particular vein, we talk about having a mission statement and a vision for your marriage and for your family. So that's one leg of that. Another component is the physical side. So not just sexually for married couples, but physical in terms of physical proximity and how much affection is being shown to husband, wife, kids. What is happening there from a physical proximity standpoint? Then another component is the emotional piece. The emotional piece is typically the hardest piece to develop. It's the hardest piece to develop because there's some vulnerability involved and you have to grow into that. There has to be a safe space and environment created for that. So that can be a tough one. The other one is intellectual. And intellectual is the ability to have great conversations that are enriching, that are focused, uh, that help to grow you and help to stretch you, and not necessarily things that will cause arguments or conflicts, but things that get you to think, "Oh, I never thought about it like that before. Okay, I can see why you would think that. Hmm, I don't know if I agree with that, but hey, you know what? Let's flush that out." Those kinds of conversations, right? And then the other component is where we tend to steer folks to, because all of what I just described on its own, for us to give you homework, for us to give you tips and tools to try to, in a very practical way, begin to flush out, can be daunting for individuals who have not done that before. So that's all context and setup for the hack, which is now the experiential piece. The experiential piece now focuses on, whether it's a married couple or a family, focuses on creating experiences that have only two criteria. The experiences should put you all in the same place, and the experiences should give you a common goal. So here's an example. Myself, my wife, one of my daughters, and my grandson went apple picking recently. So the experience, we're all in the same place. We're in the apple orchard. The common goal is we out here picking apples, right? So just to give you an idea of what I mean by experience, it doesn't have to be anything outlandish. It can be cooking a meal on one end of the spectrum. It could be flying to Dubai on the other end of the spectrum, right? But here's what that does. If you are consistent and intentional about creating these experiences, what you will tend to see over time, and this has been our experience with our clients, is that you begin to see all of the other components that I talked about, the spiritual, the emotional, the physical, the intellectual. You begin to see those areas grow organically. I'll use my wife and I as an example with a very simple experience, right? So my wife and I love to jump in the car, especially on the weekends, jump in the car and go for a drive. So what we'll do is we won't have a destination in mind. We'll just say, listen, we're going to pick a direction. We're going to drive north for an hour and 15 minutes. And then when we come back home, we're going to take a different route than what we came. So we'll come back home a different route. Typically, it's going to be some type of scenic route. We're going to see some houses along the way. We love looking at big houses. So we're probably going to pick a place where we know we're going to drive by some great homes and that kind of thing. And so here's the experience. I said it has to have two criteria, right? One is you got to be in the same place. We meet that criteria. We're in the car. Two, common goal. We meet that criteria as well. We're going for a drive together and we want to see some houses and some scenery and that kind of thing. Now, here's where all the other things come into play. Typically, when we're in the car, we're going to be listening to some music. That's going to set the atmosphere for all of these other things to happen organically. We're going to be talking about the music that we're listening to, or we're going to be talking about the houses that we see, or the people, because we'll be people watching sometimes. So there's the conversation piece. Often that conversation organically requires some level of emotion from us. Because let's say, for example, we're talking about a house and the conversation will be like, "Hey, you like that house? Yeah, you think it's too big? What if we had the money? Do you think you would get a house that big? No, I don't think I would. That seems like a little much for me, man. I ain't trying to be up there breaking all them leaves and all that kind of stuff." But then we start sharing our heart. But you know what? I do like that backyard, man. Can you imagine the barbecues we could have in that backyard? And man, I know Kobe, our grandson, would love. Now we're talking from our familial experience. So now the emotion is coming out. We're growing emotionally in an intimate way, right? Physical proximity, we're already close. We're sitting next to each other in the car. Often something will happen. I'll put my hand on her leg or she'll rub the back of my head. Now we're growing organically in the physical area, right? Then there's always some intellectual conversation because we own a business together. So we'll be like, hey, you know what? You see that building over there? Man, that would be a great building to have a what you think about having a seminar there? That would be kind of cool if we had a seminar. So now we're bouncing ideas back and forth to each other, right? And you get the point. I can go on with all the different components of how
Mhm.
it works. But doing that consistently, right? What nobody told us to do. Here's what nobody told us to do when we left the house and got in the car. Nobody told us to, hey, on that trip, make sure you're vulnerable. Make sure that you are hitting these emotional points. Make sure, like, nobody said that. And if they had, we would have been in the car stiff looking at each other like, okay, I'm gonna be vulnerable. What am I gonna do? Right? It makes it tense. It makes it a little bit daunting. But if you say, "Hey, listen, go enjoy the drive, and whatever happens, happens." Sometimes we don't plan this. We happen to go by some yogurt place and be like, "Hey, I've never been here before. Hey, let's go in here real quick and get this yogurt." Now you're adding to the experience, right? And so we have noticed that with our clients that we've seen some very significant shifts in how they navigate life with each other, how they do life together when they begin to focus on and with intention being consistent in creating those experiences. We've had couples where their only assignment after meeting with us in a session was to create an experience. And sometimes we would have couples doing all kinds of things for homework, if you will, that will help set us up for the next session or will help to reinforce the concepts and the things that we've talked about. But we've noticed, and I was sharing this with you, Juan, before we got on. I can think of one couple in particular where our session started out real heavy, intense. It was tough to move the needle in a certain direction. And one session, I was like, you know what? Listen, for right now, forget about everything we've talked about these last couple sessions. Here's what I want you to do this week: create an experience. And I had them do that 3 weeks in a row. And the short version of that story is, to skip to the end, is that the sessions that came on the heels of those 3 weeks were significantly different. I dare say 180
Mm.
in their trajectory and how we navigated those sessions than the sessions prior to them doing that. So that's something that we share quite often with couples and families, especially families with small kids. Typically, couples who have small kids, it's very tough for them to build an intimate bond from a marital standpoint because they don't spend a lot of time with each other because they're all running around behind these kids. And we've told them in the past, listen, create experiences that include all of you, because then what you'll start to feel is that the love that you express to those kids during that experience, y'all are out in the park and you pushing each other on the swings, that that emotion that exudes from that now touches everyone, including your spouse.
It's
And
contagious.
it's contagious, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a big one, man. We have had uh we've had great success with with pushing couples and families in the direction of being intentional in that area.
Yeah. That right there in and of itself, I think, is worth so much, because as it relates to intentionality, just being intentional, that means
Hmm.
that you've actually decided
Yes.
that there's something that I'm going to do that's different
Hmm.
than what I've been doing, and trying to do something um to move the needle, as you say.
Yeah.
Because I mean, to be pushing uphill and to understand that there is this, that's amazing,
Yeah.
to be able to see the value that is added to um other areas of your life. Because nobody wants, well, I'm not going to say nobody, but I'm saying it's difficult for people to be vulnerable.
It is.
It's difficult.
It is.
But to be able to recognize it, it's probably even more difficult to recognize that you're being vulnerable. And
Yep.
if you can do it organically and then be brought into the awareness of that's what you are doing,
Hmm.
that is a man, that's a hack. That is a
Yeah.
hack.
And that's generally what we do. So when couples go through that process or families go through that process, generally there is a debriefing that happens. And we talk about the emotions that they had during the experience. We talk about how they felt just in general about the experience, uh, chronicling the timeline of the experience. We go through all of the various components of the experience and how they felt, and then we tie all of the actionable things that happened. We tie them to the concepts that we had been so feverishly trying to get them to understand, right? So as simple as saying, hey, listen, this, we had some great conversation while we were at dinner the other night, and man, I feel like we talked about some things. We talked about more than just the kids, and we talked about more than just. So now we're pulling that out and saying, hey, listen, this is the emotional piece, right? Because now you're starting to share your heart. And the vulnerability piece is not just so much about you spilling your guts as it is about recognizing that an atmosphere and an environment has been created for you to share your heart.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
once you begin to share your heart, you begin to learn about the other person. And those experiences, right? Those experiences help to meet certain very important emotional needs.
Right. Hmm.
And typically, there are different types of needs, right? But when we're talking about emotional needs and the very important emotional needs, we're talking about the needs that typically, when those needs are met, you tend to fall in love with the person who meets those needs.
Oh boy, I hear
And
you.
those experience, and that's what helps that bond to be strengthened, because as you're creating those experiences and those needs are being met, like I'll use my wife and I again as an example, right? There's certain things, my love language is it's kind of a tie between quality time and physical touch, right? So going back to that car ride, on that car ride, that's quality time for me. I
Hmm.
get to hang out with her. I love hanging out with her, right? Then quite often when I'm driving, she'll rub the back of my head. That meets those emotional needs for me, right? The consistent meeting of those needs, you tend to fall in love with the person who meets your most important emotional needs. So people who are listening or looking at the replay, you probably have all heard somebody say, "Oh, he just makes me laugh all the time." Or what, there's something that they say that just, you can hear that in their voice, that they're being endeared to this person. That's because
Hmm.
that's an emotional need that's being met. And over time, somebody who might have been just a friend who's been meeting this emotional need, all of a sudden we look up and we're married. Me and that lady can attest to that, because that's how we started. We were really great friends, and all of
And
a sudden 23 years later,
but see, and that's some of the things that I talk about as connections. That
Mhm.
that's where the connections come from.
Yep.
Is though that ability to meet. See, and the thing about it is that her language, her love language, probably isn't the same as your love language.
It is not.
And so the fact is that that means that you both have something that the other one needs,
Mhm.
and that's indicative of what we talk about when we talk about the components of the characteristics of love. And that is that it's a conduit. It meets the needs of each other,
Mhm.
and that's exactly what you've just talked about, that emotional need. And that's one of those things that flows through that connection called love.
That's right.
That's amazing how that has been, how you've put that together, and you showed the fact that we have needs of each other, and when we meet those needs for each other, it causes us to fall in love with the
Yep.
other.
Yep.
I mean, that is so, it's so true.
Mhm.
When that is, when you know that, that lets you know that that's the connection for you.
Yeah.
That
It
I
yeah.
talk about the puzzle. You find where you fit when you have those needs met.
Mhm. You do. And you're more apt to doing so, right? Because those needs are being met, because those experiences are strengthening your bond. As your bond gets stronger, the all the other things that are aligned to that bond also become stronger, right?
Hmm.
And then what we teach couples to do, couples in particular, is as you begin to see these things organically growing, you need to now, here's where the work comes in for them, is that they now need to be cognizant of what's happening. So we got this beautiful result. Let's now go back and trace back to how we got that beautiful result. What kinds of conversation was happening? What was the atmosphere of the conversation? Did conversations in the car bring about that result quicker than conversations in the house? Or did conversations over dinner bring that out quicker than conversations at bedtime? And now you begin to pull all of the components, that the pieces that get you there. And where the work comes in is now you got to be consistent in making sure those pieces are already are always in play.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's where the strategy now comes in, right? So I noticed that I'll use my wife in it again, and myself as an example. My wife's love language is acts of service. So some of the some of the best jokes that we have between each other happen when we're in the kitchen. Because what I'll do is I'll start doing the dishes. She knows I don't like to do the dishes, so she'll try to come in there and elbow me out of the way so she can do them. So we end up sometimes doing them together.
Hmm.
There you go. Very simple experience, both in the kitchen. So we meet that first criteria. Common goal: clean the kitchen, right? but we also get to talk about some stuff. There's always conversation when that's happening. There's always some kind of joking around when that's happening. So now the bond can be strengthened in that way as well. Now, here's what I notice to go to talk about what I was saying. What I notice is that when I do certain things for her that lessen her mental load, that 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 increase her mental capacity, she reacts a certain way. Now, if I'm smart, because I wasn't in the beginning of my marriage, but if I'm smart, I take note of the things, the pieces of the puzzle that got me to that wonderful attitude and response and atmosphere that she's in mentally. And now I make sure that those things are always present. So that's part of the work that now comes in to play, is that now I'm now cognizant of what the end result was, and I reverse engineer to make sure that I have all of the steps and I can be consistent in the steps, because if I'm consistent in the steps, 1 plus 1 is always going to equal 2. 1 plus 1 is not going to equal 2 if I only have 1 plus 0. So I have to have some consistency in the steps in order for me to get there. And that's where we end up working with a lot of couples, is to dissect those experiences and how they felt, and then plug them into some very systematic things that they can do consistently to make sure they consistently hit the mark of achieving the goals that come from creating those experiences.
Let me ask you a question. Would this be considered, you're considered a coach, a relationship coach, correct?
Correct.
What's the difference between, and I don't know if you know it or not,
Mm.
the difference between counselor and coach?
So there is some overlap, and I'll explain what I mean by that in just a second. At face value, the difference is this: a clinical therapist is, one, licensed to diagnose. So as a coach, I cannot tell you, hey, I believe you're a narcissist. I can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not licensed to make any diagnosis, nor am I licensed to treat any level of diagnosis. A clinical therapist also works with, and here's the very easy way to put it. I'm going to use a house analogy, right? If I want to build something in this space, there are a couple of things that have to happen. One, I either got to move everything out of here, or I just got to completely demolish it. When I completely demolish it, I can't start to build right away. I have to take away all the debris and clear a path for building.
Mm-hmm.
Clinical therapy does all of that. They do all of the excavation, they do all of the demolition, they get to the bottom of an issue, they clear away the debris, they make the path clear.
Mm-hmm.
Coaching starts from that point. Coaching is like, okay, what do you want to build? All right, let's start on the foundation. Let's start on the frame. Let's see what we can get put up there, right? So I try to stay in my lane. I do have a clinical certification, but I do not morph into that lane at all. Typically, what happens if we go through a session or two and we realize that, hey, there's something more going on here, and I see the signs from a psychoanalytical standpoint, I see
Mm-hmm.
signs of certain things, I
Mm-hmm.
refer them to some therapists that are in our network.
Yeah, I mean, because you just put it very, very good in the sense of your house analogy. Because it's one of the things that I talk about in self-development, is that to know self, accept self, and develop self, the first step is you got to go in and do some self-acknowledge. You got to do some self-evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
And in many cases, that might need that clinical help.
Yeah.
You might need that clinical help to be able to do that, because you can't build on something that needs to be cleaned out.
Exactly. Now, where the overlap happens, because I said in the beginning there's some overlap, and this is what I meant by that. There are times and situations where somebody is kind of holding on to what they had before, right? So it's not in a detrimental way, but it's like, okay, to use this space as an example, this brown bookshelf behind me has sentimental value, which is why I still have it. There's a buddy of mine, his father built us this custom made entertainment center, and that's part of the entertainment center. So no matter what space I have, no matter what new space I go to, that brown thing is probably going to be there.
Right.
That doesn't always work well in relationships, though.
I hear you.
There are some things that, yeah, you might have held on to that, but it don't go with the new space.
Yeah,
So,
that couch got to go.
right. And so sometimes where the overlap comes in is the coach that realizes that is like, hey, listen, we're trying to build a whole new living room here. That couch is not going to work here. And here's why. So that's where some of the overlap from the old to the new may come into place.
Yeah, I mean components. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, but they're not making they're not making they're not hindering growth.
Right.
They're not
Right.
hindering growth.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, they're stalling it in a way, but it's not like, okay, they're stalling it in the sense of they're like, okay, listen, uh I don't want I love this carpet. I don't want to pull it up. And we're like, well, in order for us to keep going, you're gonna have to pull it up.
oh, and yeah, and that's what I'm saying. But I mean, I look at, and I'm using your example, looking at your bookshelf. I
Mhm.
mean, it's not like the bookshelf is falling apart.
Right.
It's not like the
Right.
bookshelf is an eyesore. I
Hmm.
mean, it not only does what it's intended to do, but it also aesthetically adds value to the atmosphere or to the appearance of your room.
Right.
So it's not as though it's going to detract from what
Hmm.
it is that you're trying to build. You know how some people say there's some pieces that we're going to just build around.
Right.
You
Yep.
know, you can build around them. It's not like the piece is going to just be so out of place
Hmm.
that it just don't belong there.
Yeah.
But it begins to, you know, allow you to put things around it that complements it and adds value to the whole space.
Yep. And
You know,
sometimes that's what happens. Sometimes that's what happens. Sometimes in the clinical process, they remove everything that they know that the therapist discovers and knows needs to be removed. Then from the coaching space, now it's about, hey, listen, I know you love that bookshelf and I know you've restored it and you've reconciled, you've healed, right? The bookshelf is restored. However, the place that you're attempting to put it is not conducive to your growth. So we can't, it won't fit in the bathroom.
mm-hmm,
Now it might fit in your office.
mm-hmm.
So let's think about how we can maybe move that around.
Yeah, it's the holistic approach now.
Mhm.
It's like if maybe it won't fit in this room, but we're
Right.
trying to build the whole house. We got more rooms in this house that we
Exactly.
can place this in, and we can have harmony in all of these spaces.
Yeah.
But there's certain pieces that goes in certain rooms that are more appropriate for that room. I
Yep.
mean, that's practical understanding there. That is really practical understanding there. That is really good as it relates to how we can. I think we can't discredit the fact, or not discredit, but just not understand that we cannot build on stuff that we have to um, address.
Yes.
You know, and I think under the tone of what you're all saying here, what you're saying is that um, there is space for us to understand what's needed, and then understand in that process that sometimes it's things that you have to remove,
Mhm.
as well as things that you need to grow or you have to add to be
Right.
able to grow.
Yeah. And that's like what we were talking about in the conversation we had on another live. We're talking about balance, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Sometimes balance is not about what you put on the scale to balance it. Sometimes balance is what you take off the scale to balance it.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
just being aware of that, being cognizant of that, number one, and more importantly, being open to whatever the adjustments are.
Mm-hmm.
Because you
Yes.
have people, and we see this all the time with some of our clients, you have people who know that you should, if you take this thing off the scale, it's going to create balance. But they're dead set, I ain't taking it off. I put it on there. I think it should stay on there. Okay, cool. No problem. Accept
Yeah,
the
it
imbalance.
is. Yeah, look, like, yeah, it
Yeah.
is.
Well, I'm just saying no problem for me, but accept the imbalance. You can't say on one side, I ain't taking this off, and then on the other side complain about the imbalance. It's got to be one or the other.
And that's the thing about it. And this really goes to, I guess, something that we talk about in the sense of understanding what it is you're actually looking to accomplish. You have to be intentional. Okay. Yeah. And this means that, okay, if you're looking for balance, that means that you're going to have to be willing to do whatever it takes to accomplish that balance. Mm-hmm. And that's a process of, maybe in some cases, of basically trying different things.
Yep, it is.
And when you try different things, you begin to see that there is a possibility. It might not, one thing is not, it won't bring you all the way balanced, but you see it move or it shift. Mm-hmm. And those are the things that you're looking for, is just the trajectory of improvement. Mm-hmm. And then it builds on that so that you can go, okay, that gave a little bit of a movement there. Mm-hmm. And it's a little bit of a movement and a little bit of a movement. Because I don't think anything is going to be a silver bullet.
No, not at all. Not at all. And that's typically what we tell couples too, because there's two questions I ask every couple that is going to potentially be a client. One, the first question is, and I'm talking about my married couples now, my married mm-hmm. clients. The first question I ask them is, take some time and identify your ideal relationship. What is your ideal marriage? No holds barred. Like, just dream. If you're on the cover of Great Marriage magazine, if that even exists, why are you on the cover? What's happening in your relationship, right? Have them identify that. The very second question I ask them after they identify all of that is, are you willing to do whatever it takes? Are you willing to make whatever adjustment is necessary to achieve what you identified in question one? And there's sometimes they're real quick to answer, and I'll cut them off. Like, wait a minute, hold on. Let me explain to you what I mean by whatever.
Yeah.
Things you don't know. Things you've never done before. Things you think you don't want to do. Things that are hard for you. Things that are easy for you. Things that you never saw your parents do. And the list goes on and on and on and on. Are you willing to make whatever adjustment is necessary? If the answer is no, 9 times out of 10, I'm not a good fit for that client.
Oh, there's nobody a good fit for that client. Yeah. There's nobody that's good fit for that client, because the fact is that one of the things that I talk about is the unknown knowns, mm-hmm. things that you don't know that you don't know. Yep. And until you are willing to express or to address and accept mm-hmm. those unknown knowns, those things that you don't know that you don't know, yeah. You've got to be open to what you don't know.
You got to be open. And what I tell couples often too is that you don't need to know the how, because listen, I'm the first person to say that the question I'm asking is a tough question. Are you willing to make whatever adjustments are necessary? That's a tough question. That's one I grappled with. And I talk about it in my book, in the chapter about authenticity. The problem that I had in the beginning of my marriage is that I did not want to make adjustments because I felt like it would change who I was. So I understand how difficult it is. But all I need you to say is, yes, I think I'm willing to do that. We can work on the how.
Well, and that's that you said it in a similar way that I say it, because it's going to take sacrifice. Mm-hmm. It's going to take sacrifice. And the fact is that you've got to be willing to sacrifice. And here's what your trip was: self. You were saying, I don't want to do that. I'm not willing to give that up. And mm-hmm. the sacrifice that we're talking about is sacrificing self. Yep. It's that ability to be able to say, I'm going to do whatever it takes, sacrificing. And that's one of the things I talk about in my book, in the sense that, that's what love does. It assumes the responsibility and takes on the sacrifice for the situation,
Mhm.
for whatever the situation is.
Mhm.
And that's what you're saying. You've got to be willing to take that attitude into whatever is needed.
Yep. You have to, because what you're signing up to be is a team. And many of us, I was just talking to, we just did we're on the heels of a retreat that we just did in Pennsylvania, and I was telling the group that for me, the thing that I was not taught was how to make the transition from a singular mindset to one of duality. I was not taught how to make that transition. It's okay for you to have a singular mindset. I'm not saying that's wrong, because we teach our kids to be independent. Make sure people aren't taking advantage of you. Look out for yourself. That's a singular mindset. You have to do that in order to
Mhm.
survive, navigate life in those years. When you sign up to be a team member for somebody, with somebody, that mentality has to shift, because now it's not about you, it's about the other person, and vice versa. So that's a very serious pivot that has to take place, that we don't often teach people how to do successfully. And so then they don't want to do it. Like like me, I did not want to do it. I'm like, this has been working for me. You gonna have to get on board. Like,
And that's very interesting, because again, I'm going to piggyback on that, because that's what love teaches us to do.
yeah.
Love teaches us how to do that transition
Mhm.
from that single-minded to that duality-minded sense, because when what love does is it tells us how we're going to act on behalf of someone else.
Mhm.
And so that means that I got to stop being selfish and be selfless.
Yeah.
And when I begin to operate in that, it begins to now show how I can now be willing to take on that duality,
Mhm.
how I can begin to see things in a way that I benefit when you get what you need.
Yeah.
And
That's
that's
right.
when my fulfillment comes in. That's how I'm fulfilled, when you get what I have for you. That's love. That's what this union, this team is all about, because when I'm fulfilling my part in the team,
Mhm.
everybody wins.
Yep. Exactly.
Everybody, because there's nobody on the team that's going to lose if we all doing our part.
Right.
you know and I don't mean that in the sense that in the win-loss case. I'm
Mhm.
talking about accomplishing the objectives that we put forth as a team. So
Mhm.
we look, this is our game plan, guys. We put this game plan together. Now, was it a good game plan or not? I don't know,
Right.
but we worked it together.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, next time, if we didn't win, maybe we'll put a different game plan together. But
Right.
it wasn't because we wasn't in it together. We
Right.
didn't. We didn't all do our part.
Right. And that's what a lot of people don't recognize, right? I think we often, and rightly so, to some degree, we often evaluate progress based on positive outcome. And that's okay. I'm not saying that we should not, right? But sometimes it's not so much about positive outcome as much as it is about the togetherness that was achieved in the process. So
Again,
you do something together, and it may the outcome may not be positive, but because you did it together, you're able to evaluate it together,
well,
and you're
I
able to
would,
create strategy together for whatever the next time is.
yeah, but I would even push back on the positivity of it. If we don't look at it as winning or losing,
Mm,
and just productive in the journey,
mhm. Okay.
I think we can have a different approach to it. I'm not saying that you ain't in it to win it, but the
Right.
fact is that everybody ain't gonna win every time. But
True.
it's only in the process of being able to say, look, if we don't win, I'm not pointing the finger at you because you didn't do your part.
Mhm. Yep.
We're gonna
Yep.
go back and evaluate this thing and says we gave it all we had. We
Mhm.
worked the plan didn't work. Now let's go back and reevaluate how we can address it so that the
Mhm.
next time we'll be able to be a little bit closer to what our objective is.
Yep. I
And I
love it.
that's win-win. It's like I've said before, we look at opportunities as teachable moments.
You have to. You
as
have to.
teachable moments.
There is a lesson in every loss.
Hey, look, and here's the thing. Hopefully, it's a lesson in every win too.
Indeed, there is a lesson in every
Because
win.
you
Indeed.
can be on your morals if you're on your laurels there, and you thinking that you got it all in a pile of cherries. You only as strong and as good as your last outing.
Mm, yeah.
You know, we was all
But
good last night, but
mm,
today,
it's
you
a
know,
different day.
it's a different day. And that's where you were talking about those
Hmm.
experiences and
Yep.
knowing, being intentional and understanding that you've got to put effort in to
Hmm.
sustaining though that understanding that you're gaining.
Yep. Indeed, you do. That consistency is crucial to your success, whatever you deem as success. Because what consistency begets progress,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you're consistent enough, you're going to move. If you put one foot in front of the other, if you go outside right now and put one foot in front of the other, you're gonna be up the block.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it takes you all night because you were going slow, you're gonna get up the block at some point, right?
Yep.
So consistency begets progress. Progress begets motivation. Because when you see progress now, you're like, oh, that's dope. Okay, maybe I can,
Mm-hmm.
right? Motivation now creates the it allows you now to continue to put things in place, right? So the motivation now manufactures some level of strategy or some level of thinking, right?
Yeah. I say action.
Or action, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now you got it. Now we're back to the beginning of that cycle. With that, you now have to be consistent so that you
Mm-hmm.
see progress. See, it just keeps going.
Yeah. Yeah. It's actually you just demonstrated a thing that I call the formula for success, or the
Mm,
problem solving and decision making, is that you get into this loop and it just begins to repeat itself
hmm.
over and over again. And so you're becoming very intentional in your actions
Yep.
because they're in line with all of those other things that you talk about, your motivation, your
Hmm.
attitude, and that's something that other things that I talk about.
Hmm.
But yeah, that is exactly what we're trying to foster in our families,
Yeah, indeed.
is so that we can demonstrate this as relates to how you're talking about in the relationship space. But that relationship, it starts the ball rolling on any family
Indeed.
so as to be the example that is demonstrated to all of the participants in that family.
Hmm.
And I tell you, it speaks volumes when as a child you look and see things that are being done in a manner that you don't even know it's being done, and
Hmm.
it's drawing you in a very positive manner, in a positive way.
Yep.
And that's something that I think can't be overlooked in the value that what you're talking about, to the family,
Hmm.
to generationals, to generations.
That's right. You're creating legacy. You're creating a legacy of strong bonds because you by doing that you normalize certain behavior. You normalize how life is navigated. You normalize how you navigate it together. And so kids who come up under that, families who are big on that, now pass that on. And so they're going to look for that in their own relationships and families because it was normalized that this bond needs to be strengthened, that there's intentionality and consistency there. And
and and
they understand and have grown fond of the results of that intention and consistency.
and it translates into professional relationships.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
And I mean, because I mean, at that point it begins to give you the ability to be able to look over and see professional relationships in a manner that you can begin to navigate them
Mm-hmm.
in a more successful manner
Mm-hmm.
because of those tools of being able to know how to communicate with others,
That's
how
right.
to interact with others, and how to give them what they need, and also allow them to give you what you need.
Indeed, it's 100% transferable. When we talk about synergy in the corporate space, when we talk about synergy amongst teams, team building, we talk about team productivity and strength finders and all of these different things that we talk about in the corporate space to help uh, get a team to the place where their level of productivity is high based on the alignment to their level of synergy. All we're
Mhm,
talking about is strengthening bonds. We're just using different terminology,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
We're just using different terminology, but it's the same thing. It's the same process. Understanding what that person, what that person's needs are, in juxtaposed to yours, understanding how the team operates in those needs, how the
mhm.
meeting of those needs it aligns to the personal well-being. That personal well-being aligns to the level of productivity. It's all the same thing. It's just different terminology.
Absolutely. And I, interesting enough though is because you're talking the same language, and use different words, but it's the exact same word. But when we talk about teamwork, it's a
Hmm.
bigger picture.
Hmm.
A team has a bigger objective than any one individual.
Right.
And once you begin to understand where you fit in that team and understand what the objective is of that team, then you all have this focus on what that is. And you got 5, 6, 10, 12 people working to accomplish one goal.
Hmm.
That's power.
Yep.
That's the power of a team.
And they want to be there,
Oh,
and they
absolutely.
want to contribute to the success
Absolutely.
because of the synergy that was created.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Hey, that information that you shared tonight, I think this is um, that value that you couldn't have get it, and you couldn't have gave it this much at the webinar on Saturday. But hopefully, this really unpacked the value of just something as as quickly as you said it on Saturday. It was like, how about those experiences? Create some experiences.
Mhm.
Um, it's a tremendous value when you do it organically, across the board,
Yep.
just wanting to be in the same space together
Yep.
with the same goal.
It's important.
It's just that simple. Hey, Oliver, you have made it to the end of tonight's show. And let people know how they can reach you and get in touch with you.
Indeed. If you want to get in touch with me and you are a social media person, right beside my name on the screen is our social media handle. That's everywhere. So everywhere on social media, if you type in Denali LLC, you'll find us. If you want to email me, my email is also on the screen right now, oliver@denali.org. Denali.org is the website. You can visit us there as well. Author of the book, Overcoming the Man Laws for the Man Who Wants to Be His Best Despite What He Was Taught. Speaker and coach in the relationship building and men's enrichment space. I'd love to connect with you.
Hey, that's great. He's also a strategic partner of ours. So by all means, reach out to him, because, again, one of the resources that we provide at Clear Journey is these types of resources, those that are experts in what they do, so that they can help you navigate life successfully. Also, go over to clearjourney.org and find out more about what we do as it relates to living a better life, because we have 8 areas of life that we promote. And we want you to live the very best life that you can. Um, we are here to serve you. Um, there is nothing that we want to do more than to see you reach your full potential. Um, that being said, If you want to reach out to me, I'm the author of Love Made Simple, the guide to inner peace, contentment, and success. All of the things that I personally live by and operate through is out of the view and from this perspective of love and understanding that it gives us the attitudes that we need to be able to accomplish the things that Oliver is talking about. You know, when he was saying, you've got to be willing to do whatever it takes. That's the attitude of love. That's the attitude of love, doing whatever it takes to meet the objective. You know, I have a military background in the sense that I'm a veteran. And as it relates to the military, the objective was bigger than any of us, one person. And I know some people talked about, you know, in the military, they said you're expendable. And that, you know, let's keep it real. The objective is bigger than any one person. But when we talk about it and understand that when you get into it, you're going to do whatever it takes to accomplish the objective. That's what we need to put into my mind when we enter in relationships and we understand the value that the relationship is based on what we put into it. Mm-hmm. And so if that is something that you want to know about, take a look at the book, read the book, grab the book. You can pick it up on Amazon. You can get the book. It's Audible now. And if you go Audible, you might hear some voices that you've heard before. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, and by all means, if you pick it up, you will be supporting Clear Journey. And our mission is to serve and to help individuals and families who are looking for answers in life. That being said, like I said, go over to clearjourney.org, look around, see if there's anything there that you might be, that can help you on your journey. And like I said, anything you want to close it out with, Oliver?
No, I think it was a good conversation. If you want to learn more about how to do that, definitely get in contact with me. But yeah, it's so important that we are navigating life with intention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like at the end of all of our episodes, I say we can't change life, but we sure can help you navigate it better. And until next time, we'll see you there. And we hope that you're navigating it a little bit better after this episode of It's Life Live. So we'll see you next time.
Later.